You won't believe the surprising secrets hidden in the story of Jesus' Last Supper. In this video, you'll explore the significance of Jesus' Last Supper, the events that unfolded, and what they mean for Christians today. The Last Supper is one of the most pivotal moments in Christian history, and yet, many of us take it for granted. We've heard the story so many times, but have you ever stopped to think about what really happened that night? Today, we're going to dive deeper into the context, the characters, and the consequences of this dramatic event. By the time we're done, you'll have a fresh perspective on Jesus' Last Supper and a new appreciation for its importance in the Christian faith. So, let's get started and uncover the surprising secrets hidden in this famous story. So, what exactly is the big deal about the Last Supper? Why does it matter to Christians today? The answers might surprise you, but before we get into the details, let's set the stage and get a better understanding of what was going on in the days leading up to this critical moment. Moving on to the topic at hand, it's essential to address some common misconceptions about the Last Supper. A lot of us have preconceived notions about what happened that night, but are they based on fact or fiction? Let's take a closer look at the myths and legends surrounding this event and separate them from the truth. One common misconception is that the Last Supper was a sad and somber occasion. However, when we examine the gospel accounts, we find that's not entirely accurate. In fact, the mood was complex, with elements of joy, gratitude, and even humor mixed in with the more obvious emotions of sorrow and betrayal. Another myth is that Judas was the only one who didn't get it, that the other disciples were perfectly aware of Jesus' plan. But the reality is that all of the disciples were struggling to understand Jesus' mission, and even Peter, Jesus' closest friend, was about to deny him 3 times. Some people think that the Last Supper was a traditional Jewish Seder, but the truth is that it was something entirely new and unique. Jesus was using the familiar rituals and symbols of the Passover to convey a radically new message about his own identity and purpose. Furthermore, many people assume that Jesus' announcement of his betrayal was a complete surprise to everyone at the table. However, when we look closely at the text, we find that Jesus had been hinting at this moment for quite some time. It's also commonly believed that the Last Supper was primarily about Jesus' death and sacrifice, but we'll see that it's just as much about his life, his teachings, and his relationships with the people around him. Some people think that the Last Supper is mainly a story about the end, but it's really a story about a new beginning. It's about the start of a new era, a new covenant, and a new community of people who would follow Jesus. In addition, many people assume that the Last Supper is only relevant to Christians, but we'll discover that its themes and motifs resonate with people of all faiths and backgrounds. Moreover, it's often thought that the Last Supper is an isolated event, unrelated to the rest of Jesus' ministry. However, we'll see that it's actually the culmination of everything Jesus had been teaching and doing up until that point. Another misconception is that the Last Supper is purely a historical event, devoid of any deeper symbolism or meaning. But we'll explore how the bread, the wine, and even the table itself held profound significance for Jesus and his disciples. The Last Supper is not just a story about what happened, it's also a story about what it means. It's not just an event, it's a sacrament, a ritual that continues to shape the lives of millions of people around the world. Understanding the true context of the Last Supper is essential for grasping its importance. When we get beyond the myths and misconceptions, we're able to see this amazing story in a whole new light. Let's dive into the biblical accounts of the Last Supper, examining the symbolism of the bread and wine, the roles of the disciples, and the prophetic elements present. The story of the Last Supper is found in all 4 Gospels, but each one provides a unique perspective on the events that unfolded. Matthew, Mark, and Luke focus on the institution of the Lord's Supper, while John's Gospel takes a more theological approach, exploring the significance of Jesus' words and actions. As we explore the biblical accounts, we find that the Last Supper was not just a meal, it was a ritual, a sacred ceremony that Jesus was using to convey a deeper truth about himself and his mission. At the heart of the Last Supper is the symbol of the bread, which represents Jesus' body, broken for us. But what does this mean exactly? How did the disciples understand the symbolism? And what does it mean for us today? The wine, of course, represents Jesus' blood, poured out for us. But there's more to this symbolism than meets the eye. We'll explore how the wine points to the new covenant, the new relationship between God and humanity that Jesus was establishing. The disciples played a crucial role in the Last Supper, but they're not just passive observers. They're active participants, responding to Jesus' words and actions in their own unique ways. We'll see how Peter, Thomas, and the other disciples each had their own reactions to the events of that night. One of the most striking aspects of the Last Supper is its prophetic elements. Jesus was not just speaking about his own death and resurrection, he was also pointing to a larger reality, a reality that would unfold in the days and weeks to come. As we delve deeper into the biblical accounts, we find that the Last Supper is not just a story about Jesus, it's also a story about us. It's a story about our own relationships with God, with each other, and with the world around us. Reveal the pivotal moment when Jesus announces the betrayal and discuss its emotional and theological implications. The announcement of the betrayal is one of the most dramatic moments in the Last Supper. Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," and the disciples are stunned. They start asking, "Is it I, Lord?" And Jesus responds, "The one who dips his hand into the bowl with me will betray me." This moment is pivotal because it marks a turning point in the story. Up until now, the disciples had been arguing about who was the greatest, but suddenly, they're faced with the reality of their own failures and weaknesses. The emotional implications of this moment are huge. The disciples are shocked, confused, and even terrified. They're forced to confront their own mortality and the darkness that lurks within their own hearts. But there are also profound theological implications. Jesus is not just announcing his own betrayal, he's also revealing the deeper truth about humanity. We're all capable of betraying each other, of abandoning our relationships and our commitments. This moment is also prophetic, pointing to the larger reality of human sin and failure. It's a reminder that we're all in need of forgiveness, of mercy, and of grace. As we reflect on this pivotal moment, we're forced to ask ourselves some hard questions. How do we respond when we're faced with our own failures and weaknesses? Do we turn to God, or do we turn away? Recap the key insights from the Last Supper and how they contribute to the overall narrative of Jesus' mission and sacrifice. As we wrap up our exploration of the Last Supper, we've gained some incredible insights into this pivotal moment in Christian history. We've seen how the events of that night were full of symbolism, prophecy, and emotional drama. We've discovered how the Last Supper is not just a story about Jesus, it's also a story about us. It's a story about our own relationships with God, with each other, and with the world around us. We've also seen how the Last Supper is not just an event, it's a sacrament, a ritual that continues to shape the lives of millions of people around the world. As we reflect on the significance of the Last Supper, we're reminded of the larger narrative of Jesus' mission and sacrifice. We're reminded of the cross, of the resurrection, and of the new life that's available to us through faith in Jesus Christ. Encourage viewers to share their thoughts on the Last Supper in the comments, and invite them to watch your other videos on biblical events. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the surprising secrets of Jesus' Last Supper. What are your thoughts on this pivotal moment in Christian history? Share your insights and reflections in the comments below. And if you want to explore more biblical events and stories, be sure to check out my other videos and subscribe to my channel for more content.